Have you ever found bookkeeping stressful and difficult to do in time? The importance of accurate and timely financial information has never been more important for GP practices, federations, and PCNs. Welcome to Katie Collin Beyond the Balance Sheet. And for this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Gareth Salomon, who's the founder and creator of Xenon Connect, an amazing software that integrates with all the cloud platforms to be able to look at your bookkeeping information. Gareth has developed this software to look at accuracy, timely information, and all the key issues that accountants and bookkeepers spot on a regular basis. Gareth, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Katie. Really appreciate it.
No, it's great to have you here. So before we launch into talking all about bookkeeping and Xenon, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm an accountant by trade, have been since 2003, run my own practice for 12 years, up until 2 years ago. 4 years ago, I jumped across to software. So we started creating something called Xenon Connect for accountants and bookkeepers and business owners to essentially cut down all those errors in the bookkeeping. So it was a bit of a leap for me from accountant to software developer, but it seems to have worked and thoroughly enjoying it.
How come you decided to make that leap? I know accountancy is extremely exciting and glamorous, but you decided to move over to software. How come?
I think it was the hours spent sifting through nominal ledgers and creditors and debtors reports, spotting issues. It was just demoralizing, really. We did the same thing day in, day out. I'm sure you've done your fair deal of that in the past as well. We all know what an error looks like when we spot it, but it's the time it takes to actually find these, especially for larger clients. It just doesn't seem to be the best use of our time, in my opinion. So that's why I started creating with a fab team, essentially some software, which cuts down the amount of time spent by the humans in that element as well.
So obviously you started building this software. How did that journey begin? What did that look like?
Great question. Feels like a long time ago now, about 4 years ago. I've always had an interest in software myself, so I've always dabbled with web development like a lot of people do, but didn't really get into it seriously until about 4 years ago. And it was more of working out what my own practice needed at the time. And then I had a few contacts that were heavily into web development and I knew could help me out in that area. So I built a relationship with them and essentially just built an MVP, so minimum viable product, to get something which is of value to me within my own firm at the start. I think it was spotting 5 different types of errors at the time was the initial MVP that we put out there, just to see if there's a use case for it now. And yes.
So you said those sort of initial errors. What were the sort of things that you were seeing on a day-to-day basis as an accountant looking after clients?
Sure. So there's some typical errors that you tend to see. So duplication of bills and invoices, that's a common one. Obviously, that can massively affect the profit if there's 2 of every item in there as well. Things like unprocessed bank items. So if the bank's not reconciled, then it's going to be an issue because that bookkeeping's never going to be complete, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we see.
They're the 2 main ones, and old unpaid bills and invoices. Just things that are left there on the ledger. And as accountants and bookkeepers, we know that just can't stay there indefinitely. But from the point of view of perhaps the business owner, it's not something that they're potentially reviewing all the time. So, for example, if we've got a load of bills that are sitting there on the ledger, if there's a few that are sitting there because you can't find the payments but against them, but they have been paid somewhere, it's going to be a problem if they're left there indefinitely. So we've got a check whereby it looks for those old items that haven't been paid for a long time.
We see that a lot. So one of the things that we spot as our clients, medical specialists, they're amazing at looking after patients and doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, but accountancy isn't their forte or their area of specialism, and they don't necessarily spot those things. So those things get carried forward year on year. Can you give us a red flag checklist of the top 5 things to look out for that might potentially be an issue?
Great question. Okay, so first thing would be, I know we've discussed it before, unreconciled bank items, making sure that the bank postings are accurate and complete. Second one would be old unpaid bills, making sure they're not just sitting there indefinitely unpaid on your bookkeeping software. Now, related to that one is something that we call bill of direct, which is when whoever's doing the bookkeeping has posted the supplier bill onto Xero, for example, but when they've posted the bank payment for that bill, instead of putting it against the bill, they've put it straight to an expense code instead.
Yeah, we see that one a lot.
Yeah. Another one would be duplicate invoices, make sure that things aren't getting added more than once as well.
Mm.
And then other ones are really things that can be used to speed up the process of doing the bookkeeping. So things like duplicate contacts. So within your bookkeeping package, when you enter more data in, if you've used a different spelling mistake for a customer or supplier, it will create a new contact record automatically. And that results in multiple contacts. And it can be frustrating doing the bookkeeping going forward because you've got these, you don't know which is the active record you need to use.
Yeah.
So having a check every now and again, like we have in Xenon, to say, okay, this looks like it's been added more than once, this supplier or this customer. What do you want to do about that? Get rid of it.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot more of that. So in the reporting function, definitely, we do quite a lot of reporting for PCNs, for primary care networks, and we might want to drill down and see what all the payments made to each practice during the year. But of course, you might have 3 different columns for the same practice, which has been spelt 3 different ways. Yeah. So the reporting it's not as meaningful, and then you spend the manual time tidying it all up. So yeah, that's definitely helpful. And can Xenon can pick up those differences then automatically and suggest that it thinks it's a duplicate. Yeah,
so it gives a similarity score between every single customer or supplier and the ledgers there, and it gives you the option of either archiving it directly if you want, there's one you want to get rid of to hide it, or go into Xero and then correct it and merge it into the contact as well.
Very cool. And as you say, I think it's the time that it takes people. So I know I've always found it difficult when we keep sending emails saying, oh, we've spotted this unpaid bill. Could you let us know? That takes time for them to go back and look into that. And as you say, time is probably the most precious resource. So yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear how you develop that. So what does Xenon actually do? How does it work? Sure. What does it interface with? Just tell us a bit about the actual software.
So it's cloud software. So it's browser-based. And behind the scenes, it plugs into QuickBooks Online, Free Agent, Xero, and Sage as well, the cloud version. And it pulls in all the bookkeeping data on behalf of clients that the accountant or bookkeeper authenticates on behalf of. And it reviews that bookkeeping transactional history against double entry bookkeeping norms. So there's certain rules that we all know are built into double entry. It taps into that to make sure that transactions don't sit outside those rules, essentially. So every night it syncs the data, pulls it in, produces this checklist of potential issues for whoever's looking at this checklist to review and fix faster.
Wow. And it does all of that automatically?
It does, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So for those people who don't use it, of course, at Ramsey Brown we do, so we know it very well. But what does that look like in terms of actually being able to see, where things have maybe gone wrong or that there are duplicate bills? How would that be presented to someone?
So the first thing that the user would see is a big shiny health score, which essentially tells them subjectively in a way, but with an objective number of issues behind it, the state of play in terms of the quality of the bookkeeping. So it looks at all these transactions, it finds these potential issues, and it says, okay, your health score is 70% or 80%, whatever it may be. And then flowing down from that is 24 different specific bookkeeping checks. So looking for those duplicates, those old unpaid items and so on, which you can drill into and look at specific transactions which make up those issue lists. So once an issue is found and it needs correcting, then the user can then push back corrections to the bookkeeping ledger from Xenon as well. So it's a two-way sync of data, just speeding up that flow of detecting the issues and then pushing the corrections back.
Yeah, so we use it at Ramsey Brown. We're big fans of Xenon. For all of our bookkeeping clients, we use it and we send a monthly report to our clients saying this is your health score. So if you are a bookkeeping client, hopefully you'll have received that report. But we find it really helpful because it's that snapshot, isn't it, that really shows people, okay, this is what's going on. And one of the things that we've spotted with GP practices is they'll have different sorts of issues between different practices. So you might have one practice manager who is really struggling to get through the data. They'll have a critical health score of 20% because all their items are unreconciled. But that doesn't mean that their bookkeeping is actually necessarily a problem itself. It's just that they haven't done the reconciliations. Whereas you might have another one where they've done all the reconciliations, but a classic one, as you say, is unpaid bills because they've created the transaction already and they've created a bill and double counted. One of the situations we've also spotted is when it happens on the sales income. It's not so bad on the expenses. When you find it, then your profits go up. That's quite a good situation. It's when your profits have been double counted and obviously you reverse that. That's quite a a bit of a blow to find out that actually you're not earning the money that you thought you were, or you had income there that you spent. So that's really interesting to hear, that breakdown, and that you can push that through directly into Xero.
Sure.
So you can actually drill down to the transactions from the software itself.
Yeah. And it's underlying, if the data is bad, then whatever comes out the other end is going to be just as bad, isn't it? And we can't really rely on those figures if the data that's going into the bookkeeping is incorrect. So it's promoting best practice to make sure it's giving whoever's the user of the software a bit of a nudge to say, just look into these issues and determine whether they need fixing or not.
Yeah. How do you determine what are the areas that you think where there are going to be problems? So obviously unreconciled items is a big one. If you haven't got anything reconciled, you've got no data. That one's quite an obvious one. Is that just from experience, or do you get feedback from people using the software? How do you decide what those critical areas are?
It started off with my own experience. So those sort of 5 or 10 checks originally was things that I wanted to see within my own practice that I was dealing with manually all the time. But over the years, I think I've spoken to, it's around about 300 bookkeepers and accountant firms personally, and demo calls, and it's the feedback we get from them essentially is what leads the roadmap going forward. So the additional checks we've added since then have heavily been weighted by what people like yourself want within the checks there in Xenon.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we tailor ours a lot, obviously, to the medical profession and the big issues that we see there. We are big fans of Xero, as you know. We're platinum partners of Xero, so we use Xero a lot. One of the fantastic things about Xero is you can actually now make payments directly from Xero. But of course, if you've got duplicate suppliers, then you could potentially have issues with paying the wrong people or paying people twice when you're raising invoices. So that's a really good check that we've used. And in real life, we've had a client where they have had issues like that, and we've been able to use Xenon to sort that out. So
yeah, it's fixing that data, isn't it? Because everything happens after that leads on from that data. So if it's cash flow forecasting, if it's making payments, if it's the compliance itself, so it's submitting the tax returns and accounts, it all stems from having that accurate data, isn't it? So
yeah, and real-time data, I suppose that's the big thing as well.
Yeah.
So next question would be, what's your biggest myth buster for GP practices, primary care networks, and any other healthcare professionals who are using Xero?
Okay, I suppose fundamentally it's the bank account. I think a lot of business owners, they think that, okay, well, my bank's reconciled because they've done a bit of training in bookkeeping, and they said, okay, the first thing they need to do is make sure it's reconciled. And of course, they do need to make sure it's reconciled,
Of course.
but it doesn't paint the full picture. Just because you reconcile your bank account, as you know, it doesn't mean that the accounts and bookkeeping is completely accurate. There's just so much more behind the scenes that can go wrong outside of just that bank reconciliation.
Absolutely. That's so true. And we sometimes have practices who will panic because they haven't done their bookkeeping, and then they just code all of the income to income and all the expenses into expenses. And they say, oh, I finished the bookkeeping now. And you've got 2 lines, one that says income, one that says expenses. It doesn't mean anything. So you can't do anything meaningful from it. No. So very true. For those of you out there, Mythbuster, reconciling the bank isn't just the answer. You've got to make sure the data's correct as well. So do you have a live example of a situation where you had a client who had real problems with their bookkeeping and Xenon really supported you in fixing that?
I think the biggest one for me was in my own accounting firm when we first started using Xenon. It was the opening balances check. So there's a big issue in the industry, in my opinion, that some bookkeepers, accountants or business owners deal with to varying degrees of success. And that is making sure that the opening balances agree. So it's going into a bit of the technical side of the bookkeeping, but it's making sure the balance sheet that you submitted, for example, to HMRC or Companies House ties in with what the Xero account's saying or the bookkeeping saying itself. Because if it doesn't, that starting point is always going to be out, isn't it? Which will push your future figures out as well. So an example that I had, when we took on a new client, it was into the hundreds of thousands of pounds, this opening balance differences. So it was really out of kilter. And obviously that business owner was making financial decisions based on that wrong data going forward. So we obviously had to use that information, correct it, and then get them on a better footing going forward.
Yeah. It's really interesting you mentioned that, because we produce our clients' accounts directly from zero. And one of the things that we spot when we pick up new clients is often accountants will take data from the client's software, whether it be Xero, QuickBooks, whatever it is. They input it into their own systems and then they make their own adjustments. But actually the software the client's using, let's say the GP practice, hasn't been updated.
No.
So of course, their decisions they're making, if they run a profit and loss or they run their own reporting, is completely out of sync with what's happened in the previous set of accounts. We had this situation, we picked up a new client and they were making decisions. They were doing all the right things. They were running the quarterly reports and looking at the P&L. They had really high profits. And they thought, oh, this is brilliant. And actually it was because a lot of the income had been brought into the previous sets of accounts, but they hadn't done the opening balances and the previous accountants hadn't made those adjustments in the software. So of course, actually that income belonged to the previous year. And then they were sailing along, spending all their money on locums, thinking that everything was great. And of course, once we adjusted the opening balances, they realized they didn't have that money actually was their profits last year that they'd already paid tax on. So opening balances is a big one that definitely is really important.
Yeah, and it's scary, isn't it? Because it's a bit of a hidden issue for the untrained eye because it's not obvious. Because you might be reconciling your bank account as a business owner, you might be making sure there's no old unpaid invoices and so on. But something like an opening balance journal missing, it's probably not common knowledge to most business owners that they would need to do that.
No.
And they could just keep sailing on and thinking everything's fine with the figures. But the reality is it could be massively out.
Yeah. And that's a really important thing about having an accountant, because that's definitely the first starting point when you start the accounts is what are the opening balances?
Yeah.
And that's really where the role of having someone separate coming in and looking at those figures is so crucial. So absolutely, that's a really, really interesting live example. As I said, we've used Xenon on a lot of occasions. So we've done it with our regular bookkeeping clients where we give them their health score. And it also just helps us identify, if things are going really well. So, brilliant, your health score is 99%. Practice manager's giving us information, everything's looking really good. But it also flags that communication, I suppose, within the bookkeeper, or in practice's case, the practice manager, and maybe sort of the business owners, where sometimes there's a disconnect that they don't realise the person doing the bookkeeping has actually struggled because they're so busy or they've got behind. That for us, sending that report out was saying, actually, we're not getting the information we need. It's no one's fault, but actually maybe it's time that we could take over the bookkeeping and get things running, or you need to get your accounts up to date, otherwise you won't have them done in time. So I don't know if that's something that you've experienced in terms of sort of that disconnect, maybe? I
think definitely. I think because it's a tangible report you can produce with a health score, it provides that talking point and it provides accountability. Because if there's a report in front of you that both parties, the accountant and the client, can be discussing, it provides us talking points about what needs to be done and who's expected to do it. Now, if I was an accountant and wanted to produce that report manually, the amount of time it would take, it just wouldn't be worth doing, would it, at all?
We've done it. I can tell you it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And sometimes it's a case of you just end up fixing the issues yourself. If the client's done the bookkeeping and it's quicker for you as an accountant to say, actually, I can see they've done that wrong, and then you're fixing it. But the issue is that the client will never learn about what they need to do to improve the bookkeeping going forward. So having that tangible report, in my mind, communicates those issues and really helps with that relationship going forward between accountant and business owner too.
Absolutely. An interesting question. Just, have you seen a shift between the expectations from accountants and bookkeepers in terms of what they're delivering on a regular basis? So for our clients, a lot of them, as general partnerships, it will be doing their year-end accounts. And what we've found in the medical sector is this need for actually real-time data. So rather than waiting for, your March 25 accounts in sort of September, October, November, and spotting the bookkeeping issues, actually what we work on is a lot of prospective information for clients, so regularly quarterly management accounts, monthly management accounts. Has that put more pressure, do you think, on accountants and bookkeepers in terms of the quality of data? Because rather than sort of looking at a year-end set of accounts where you can make all the adjustments, if there are errors during the year, that's really affecting the live data now that they're making decisions on.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's more of that expectation of real-time information, especially with them, with MTD and things coming in anyway. It'll need to be updated more regularly than just annually. And I think there has been a shift in the industry, that the amount of business owners that are looking to get that information up front, not just at the end of the year, is definitely increased. In terms of the workload for accountants, obviously it's more work, unfortunately, to be done. But at the end of the day, it's helping the business owner, isn't it?
Yeah.
By giving them that information they need to make the better decisions. So
absolutely. And interesting, you mentioned MTD, making tax digital. We have talked about this with our clients. This is the quarterly reporting to HMRC that's going to start from April 26, if you're within the certain threshold. Presumably also for people who don't have not only up-to-date bookkeeping, but accurate bookkeeping, potentially there's more risk of tax investigation, right? Because if you kind of sail along with all your duplicate bills and then you suddenly realise at the end that they're all wrong, HMRC are going to see that your final submission doesn't match any of your quarterly reports.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was the same for when MTD for VAT came in a few years ago, wasn't it? That every transaction for VAT registered companies gets reported to HMRC. And maybe a lot of business owners don't really realise that. They just think it's the overall figures on a VAT return like it used to be. But the reality is, and especially with MTD, for income tax coming in as well, every transaction is going to be seen by HMRC essentially, or available to HMRC for someone to manually review it. It's going to increase the number of reviews, isn't it, in my mind?
Oh, absolutely.
So having that accurate data is just never been more vital.
Yeah. And the whole purpose of MTD was to reduce the tax gap. Surely by investigations, they're going to be able to do that anyway. So I imagine that's going to be a big issue. So lots going on in the sector. So I'm going to move us on to talk a bit about AI, just because obviously you've made that change from being an accountant into software. What's the role of AI, do you think, in terms of the accountancy sector? How will it affect Xenon? Are there any kind of things that you're looking at, particularly with your software?
Sure, yeah. So we've started introducing a little bit. I've always held back because I didn't want to just shoehorn it in. A lot of software providers do that, and it's working out where there's a benefit in the first place and there's a use case for it. So we've started introducing it in terms of producing a commentary and narrative to support management account reports. So things like transaction counts and P&L and balance sheets as well. We started introducing that because we know that some clients digest words better than charts.
Yeah.
So that's already come in already. We're looking at more ways we can do more for making sure that those error checks are even more accurate than they are now, or introducing new ones that we wouldn't have been able to do without AI.
Yeah.
So we're definitely looking into a lot more.
It's really interesting, isn't it? How, but it's something that you said earlier really resonated. Is this is all about the quality of the data, and I think that's the thing with AI is if the data that you put in isn't there, or if it's bad data, even if you're using AI, it's still not going to necessarily work unless you've got that actual information to begin with. Certainly imagine if you've got no reconciled transactions, the commentary will be, there's nothing here.
And I guess AI can give you a bit of a false sense of security, can't it? Because it can be so adamant in its replies. If people are using ChatGPT, they'll know that, you get a pretty much certain reply from ChatGPT, but the reality is that, especially in the accounting, when you give it accounting questions, that it's not all there yet. It's not going to be making decisions for people and providing completely accurate data straight away. No. It's making sure that the use case for it is legitimate and useful, in my mind.
It's really interesting. We had a client that came to us the other day and said, well, I put into ChatGPT that Xero can do this, so I know it can do it.
Right.
And I was saying, well, yes, Xero technically can do that, but in order to make it do that, you have to follow these steps. You have to process these journals, and the shift in terms of the expectation of what's achievable. Even when clients will say things like, "Oh, well, I looked up on AI that the accounting treatment is this," and you think, yes, but there's an element of judgment of how you apply that. So there's definitely been a shift, I think, in terms of expectation of what accountants are providing. We certainly see that in the medical sector where patients come into doctors and say, well, I looked up on AI and it says I've got this wrong with me, so you treat me. And people definitely don't necessarily like that. But do you think, what's the impact do you think that AI is going to have in terms of bookkeepers that you see and accountants?
I think it'll be gradual. I think there will be less monotonous manual work there already is less of it already. And bookkeepers are using their skills for other areas now, perhaps helping with those payment runs, things like that, extra services. I don't think it will ever take a bookkeeper or accountant's job entirely. Obviously, it's taking some of those more menial tasks that we do out, but I think there's always that professional judgment that's needed that we've trained years and years to do, just as GPs and medical practitioners have as well. It's not just going to be able to make a decision on our behalf, because essentially there has to be some accountability. So if you submit a tax return and it's massively incorrect because AI's made a decision and said, actually, no, this is wrong, this needs changing, then who's accountable for that? It's not the software provider, probably, is it? It's going to be the professional. So there'll always be that professional behind that submission in my mind.
Yeah. And it's very interesting you say that about judgments, because we see it a lot often where there'll be income coming in. And in the medical sector, we've got GPs, we've got individual income, we've got practice income, we've got network income, we're now going to have neighbourhood income. So we often get something coming in and we think, well, we're not quite sure what that relates to. There's an element of professional judgment that says, well, how are we going to treat that? And AI may say, okay, it's followed this pattern, XYZ, it's come from an ICB, it's this value, let's post it as income. But as accountants, we may say, well, actually, we know that this practice is working in a larger group. We know that they're receiving income that may not necessarily be just for them. We know it's from the same payment process, but it might be something different. And we may say the risks of them declaring it as income means they're taxed on it. That's the professional judgment element. And I suppose for us, what we like about Xenon is it highlights the issues, which allows the professional to then come in and say, what are the judgments that we apply to that?
Yeah. And I think the fundamental issue with AI itself and relying on it is that it's trained on past data. And we all know, I was thinking about this before, like the investment advice whereby it says that there's no guarantee there'll be profits in the future, because just because something's happened in the past doesn't mean it'll happen in the future. It's the same for accounting transactions, isn't it? Just because those income streams were classified as something in the past, it doesn't mean they'd be classified as the same thing in the future. That's where the professional judgment has to come in. You can't rely on software to say, okay, well, this happened in the past, therefore let's keep doing it going forward. It needs that professional there.
Yeah, absolutely true. We all know in the NHS that whatever's happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be how you're paid going forwards. So that's very true. So what's next for Xenon Connect?
More data checks. So we're increasing from 24 up to hopefully 30 sort of within the next 6 months or so. Different checks, making bookkeeping data more accurate. We're also introducing more task workflows. So, for example, how to do a VAT return or how to do an MTD return to help the internal bookkeeping and accounting team to guide them through those tasks as well. That's one big area. We've got the Sage integration as well, which is coming through. So that's coming through at the moment. So yeah, lots going on.
Lots going on, yeah. And I suppose, where do you see the software in the next 5 years? If the sky was the limit and you could have anything you wanted, where would you see things going?
5 years is a long time in software,
I know.
isn't it?
Maybe we narrow it down to 3.
Yeah. I think it's just being guided by bookkeepers and accountants and their business owner clients as well, just to make sure that we're building something which is useful for how they're working in the future, not just how they're working now as well. So looking ahead to how they want to work, essentially, and just crafting the software to enable them to work how they want to work.
Is there any advice that you would give to business owners out there who are maybe struggling with their bookkeeping, or concerned that they're not getting accurate or timely data? What would you say to them?
I think the first thing would be to talk to your accountant or talk to your bookkeeper. Get their advice. Obviously, they're the best place to know. So get in touch with Ramsey Brown. After that, I think it's just be more aware of bookkeeping rules, essentially. Maybe go on a bit of a bookkeeping course if you want to get involved. I mean, I know that every business owner doesn't want to do that. They didn't start their business to actually do the bookkeeping. And I'm not thinking that's true for a second. But being aware of the financial side of things massively helps in all area of running a business, in my opinion. And just having that confidence that you're aware of what those accounts mean at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, for example, enables you to better use that information to make better decisions going forward.
I think that's what's really hard for the medical specialists, is that they're not necessarily running a business per se in the same way that you or I would run a business. Their business is their patients. So whilst they want to be self-sufficient and hopefully make a profit. I know that that's not a term that we talk about in the NHS, but it's true. People want to earn for what they're doing, but fundamentally their core focus are their patients. And so that's where we see the pressure maybe between having to run that business and what that actually means on a day-to-day basis versus the stress of trying to be able to deliver to your patients. And so that's where we try and come in and say, how can we move things forward for you? How can we help you? How can we take that burden off you? And for us, I think Xenon has been really, really helpful in making that meaningful to the business owners. And whilst it is targeted towards accountants and bookkeepers, I mean, fundamentally, presumably you're also given this report, this format to make sure that business owners can really see what's actually happening.
Sure.
What we're noticing a lot more now in the primary care space as an issue around governance, sometimes around fraud, but just generally governance. How do you think that Xenon reporting maybe might contribute to supporting practices, businesses, companies really having a more robust governance framework?
It's an extra set of eyes. It's a term I use a lot, isn't it? As business owners and accountants, we know the rules for bookkeeping. We know an error when we spot them, as we discussed before. But having that extra set of eyes to make sure that things aren't slipping through the net.
Yeah.
In terms of fraud as well, although it's not the primary use case for Xenon, obviously, if there are outliers in the bookkeeping, then sometimes those can point to fraudulent activity. So it's that extra set of eyes for the overall view of the bookkeeping data, speeding up that process there as well.
Yeah. So a number of our clients are GP federations, which large companies that represent a patch of GPs where they're all the shareholders. And those organisations have huge pressure because they may be private limited companies, but fundamentally they're not designed to be making significant profits. They're designed to represent a voice of the GPs in the area, potentially provide services for that area, but fundamentally recycle that into the community. And one of the factors of that is that they don't want to spend lots of money on having multiple finance people and loads of directors, because the money that's coming in for primary care is then spent on effectively admin resources where you've already got admin resources at practice level. So we often see there's quite a thin finance structure at those places. And I think Xenon, as you say, being an extra set of eyes, I suppose gives that kind of level of robust check that they might not have usually, because they might not have an FC, an FD, a CFO. It gives that further layer. And the health check report, I think, is probably quite a good thing for the directors maybe to see as well. Is that something that can be shared? And can that format into a set of management accounts? Because you were talking about that from Xenon.
Yes, we're introducing more and more in terms of management accounts as well, start becoming in more and more in the future, alongside the health checks. So you've got the data quality, you've got your financial performance and position metrics as well, and the reports going forward as well. So it gives that overall picture. And it's making sure that that extra set of eyes is in place. It's making sure that we're not missing things aren't slipping through the net, essentially. And when margins are tight for any business owner, then as it does with other software packages as well in different areas, it can improve that situation, can't it? It can cut down the amount of time in terms of human hours it takes to actually get the bookkeeping reviewed and so on, or the business owners to do the bookkeeping themselves. It's that extra helping hand.
Yeah. And I suppose at that level, in terms of the governance, it gives you the security that someone else has effectively reviewed it in an automated basis. It's generating regular reporting. So you said you've got that financial performance, position and health check, which is really nice in terms of financial governance, that someone else, one of the partners or one of the directors, can review that. You're starting to put those processes in place. And of course, with fraud, whilst it might not necessarily stop fraud, we do see that happening quite a lot. And I suppose it picks out those outlying transactions as well, where you think, that might look a bit different. It reminds me of an example we've seen with, particularly around payroll. This happens quite a lot, where there's often fraud in payroll, where someone might pay themselves extra overtime that hasn't been approved. The benefit of using something like Xenon is it's prompting you to make sure that all the records are accurate, up to date, of course, and you can start to spot hold on, my payroll costs have gone up a lot this month, a lot more than last month, and they're going up and up and up.
Yeah.
It prompts that check, doesn't it? Where
Definitely,
you don't have that before.
And I suppose going back to what we were talking about before, it's a good use of AI to throw AI into that process of looking for differences between periods. So if the wages bill has massively increased in a particular period, then it's going to get flagged up, isn't it, by AI quite easily to look for those correlations there as well. So yeah, it's the overall picture, cutting down the amount of time it takes to review these issues, essentially.
Absolutely. And finally, my final question, Gareth, is what's your most exciting accounting statistic, accounting bookkeeper statistic for our audience?
Okay, maybe a little less exciting but important is in terms of accuracy percentages for business owners that are doing their own bookkeeping. So it's widely known that there's at least sort of a 60% error rate, which comes into the accounts and tax returns of business owners in the UK. It's a big issue because if those errors are affecting the tax that's been charged, obviously, then it's going to be a problem. There's not paying the right amount of tax, whether it be too little or too much. Either way, it's incorrect. And just from the internal point of view of making sure that those figures are accurate for better decision making, if it's not accurate, it's going to be a problem. So 60% is a massive percentage, isn't it?
That's massive.
Yeah. Is that what you find within your practice?
But also the knock-on impact of that is that you have to, it's not just the fact that there's potential errors, it's also then you have to come in and fix those errors. So that's more time, more cost. So it's not just the cost of the error itself, it's the cost of fixing it as well. And I know that, at the moment, times are difficult. Costs are going up. We certainly see that GP income isn't going up at the percentage rate that the costs are. So the knock-on impact of not only having the error, but also having to fix it as well. 60% is a massive percentage. So the need for something to check your data and the quality of it is, I guess, more relevant now than ever.
Yeah, I think when you start a business, regardless of what it is, if you're not sort of financially minded, then it will be seen as a bit of a necessary evil, filing those tax returns, filing the accounts and so on. But the reality is that if we've got accurate data, we understand the reports, it becomes so much more than just filing compliance because it enables you to improve your business by making better decisions, by producing cash flow forecasts or management accounts to really make sure that the business is on the best footing to live and breathe into the future as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Gareth, and thank you for joining us and giving us your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Any last words that you would want to say to anyone out there?
I suppose if you're not using Xenon already, give it a go, obviously, but more importantly, get in touch with your accountant.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks a lot.
That was really helpful. That was a brilliant insight into some of the risks and issues that GP practices, PCNs, and other healthcare professionals experience. It's never been more important than now to make sure that your financial information is up to date, timely, and accurate. If you're having any problems with your bookkeeping, feel free to get in touch with Ramsey Brown. We can connect you to Xenon and make sure you're on the right platform and help you with your bookkeeping. For now, thank you and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.